Now to take a look at our work in Lake George, I'd like to turn it over to Rakib Omir and Phil Sexton.
Thanks, Chris. For those of you I'm meeting for the first time, I'm not Rakib. Someone suggested that we're twin brothers though, so I'm sort of Rakib's clone that didn't go exactly right. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce to some of you that are new to what we've been doing in Lake George. And so I'm going to take us back at least 5 years ago now. I got a call from Eric, and Eric had started to learn a bit more about some other initiatives that were going on in New Hampshire. And so that's where this sort of highlighted for me. So I come from the trade, so I'm a large-scale commercial landscape winter management contractor by trade. I've dabbled on the research side of things, and that's where Rakib and I actually met 8 years ago, perhaps. So we were both involved in a salt use study through the University of Waterloo. I was the research liaison, and Rakib was actually the research associate at the time of the university. So that's how we connected and became brothers in arms in this initiative. And then flipping over to New Hampshire, there was a real issue going on there related to the I-93 corridor, and the expansion of that highway was not going to be allowed until they did something about the road salt contamination. And that's really what highlighted where a lot of this is coming from, not just roads, but also the private. So you've also heard that from Brendan this morning and from others. So moving ahead now, we then said, okay, so can we help Lake George? We think we can, but it really started with, we really had no idea what was going on. And so that's where the story begins, is sort of just trying to understand from the standpoint of, let's just measure what's going on. And what we'd like to do is take you through that evolution and then have you actually meet some of the heroes of this. So I sort of promoted this last year. If you've never met any of your heroes before, you're going to meet some of them today. And so that's going to be the guys that are from Lake George, Hague, and Warren County. So I appreciate all you guys coming up this morning for this. So with that, I'll kick it over to Rakib.
Thanks, Phil. So Phil's done a pretty good job at doing an introduction of why is it that we're here, how is it that we're involved. I am more towards the boots on the ground side of things, and I believe this is the 4th year that we're doing this presentation. For those who've attended one of these before and were awake during my presentation, I am notorious to show graphs and charts and numbers that are very disgusting. And they've become worse and worse over the years. And every year, when I send my presentation to Chris for approval, he's like, okay, easy on the charts, easy on the numbers, more pictures. But having a research background, unfortunately, that's something I can only help so much. So let's go back and take a look at how we started and what we did. So 2016 is the first time we actually presented. So we did some work in 2015, and that was primarily to install salt trackers on, I believe we did about 20 trucks, and the goal was to be able to get an idea of what's going on. And I remember during my presentation in 2016, I was like, I can only see one thing, and that is that we're consistently inconsistent. So the numbers, they kind of make sense, but they don't. I mean, we're all over the place. So we moved on. Next year, we were like, now we not only want to see the numbers, but we also want to see how changing those numbers actually results in changes in the actual level of service, the roads. So 2017, we did a couple of things. We introduced the live edge plows, so that now there were certain trucks that had live edge plows. We did some better materials, including brine. And we also installed these weather stations to actually see how the live edge plows and the salt brine and the alternative materials, how they were working. Of course, 2017, I had a bunch of graphs, a bunch of charts, even harder to understand, so I'm not going to bore you with those. But in summary, we started seeing that there is a way to solve this problem, but it's different. Every time you run into a situation, you have to kind of improvise and find a solution that could well have never been tested before. So 2017 was a good year. We started getting some traction, and then came 2018. So between 2017 and 2018, I found these bunch of guys who I think they're heroes, who kind of, I don't know, for some reason they got it. They gave us the time and the attention that we needed to solve this problem. Some of them you're actually going to meet today as well. They're here. And we saw that in 2018, our efforts were starting to show, the numbers were starting to show that things were working. So we're going to talk more about these charts, but what you see at the top there is the potential of reduction in salt application rates that is possible just by following some of these best practices and some of these solutions that we had come up with. Again, 2018 was also a year with a lot of data, a lot of numbers. And then Chris again said, okay, no charts, no numbers. So now it's 2019, and this year I do not want to show you any graphs, charts, or numbers. Instead, what we want to do is actually have these guys come in and share their stories. Because I think the last 3-4 years that we've worked together, I mean, I really appreciate all the time that they've spent, the process that they've been through, the evolution, and how we've actually solved the problem. So you're actually going to hear from them on what we've done, how it has helped them, and where do we stand now, and where do they see this going in coming years. So I will first ask Rob from the town of Lake George to come and share some of his experiences with us. Rob? If this is where you set the bar, then just wait and see what these guys have done. I think they're going to need a lot more than this by the time he's done with this part. Okay, you're already killing it, so.
So my name is Rob Loplis. I'm Winter Maintenance Manager and an operator for the town of Lake George. We entered this initiative about 4 years ago by first installing trackers to establish a baseline. This assessed our needs and our goals, and what we are now doing is so much more. This project has not only helped the town adopt a more efficient and sustainable winter maintenance practice, but has given me the opportunity to expand my knowledge, but also help others to achieve sustainability. Get it quicker?
Oh,
There it goes.
I got it.
You got it.
All right. Calibration is by far one of the most important things you can do. It's widely misunderstood, fairly cheap to do. It doesn't matter if it's a surface temperature sensor or an application system like we see here. It has to be right. If not, the operator is misinformed and cannot perform to the best of their ability. At Lake George, we perform calibrations once a month, and depending on the truck, it can be anywhere from 2 calibrations to 6 calibrations per vehicle. Here are some equipment and practices that we feel have made a large impact for us. The Metal Plus plow that we started with one of these. We kind of moved it around from truck to truck to make sure it wasn't the operator or the truck, that it was actually the plow doing the work, scraping better and lowering numbers. We found through data that was the case. It was the plow. Now we have one on all 3 of our main trucks and are looking to expand to putting them on our pickup trucks as well. This is a brine application system. We have 2 of these. This is a 300-gallon unit. We also have a 1,000-gallon unit. We use it in a couple different practices. Anti-icing is one, where we go out before the storm, usually within 24 hours. And we'll put a very low application of salt brine down. And this does a few things for us. It buys us time. We usually get about an hour. So the guys are getting a little extra sleep. They like that. But once we get to about a quarter of an inch, which salt brine may take care of up to a quarter of an inch, it acts as a debounding agent. And we found that this saves, because throughout the entire storm, that last round that we would have had to go and actually scrape up the hard pack and stuff like that, we don't have to do that anymore. So it's saving us per truck about $560 per truck. So that's a huge savings. Just in January and February, by doing these practices, it saved us about 109 ton. Here we have some real-time data. This is where we were. You can see that basically the operator used one application rate. It was a high application rate, and it kind of stayed there the entire time. And this is where we are now. The operators are varying rates and kind of putting the right application in the right place at the right time. Here's some cameras, like Rick was talking about. Here we can see a couple different things. We use them for seeing when the storm's going to start, and to progress as the storm goes. In between rounds, we use them to see when we need to go out. And we also use them for record keeping, to keep an eye on what's going on and when the storm hit and when it was over and stuff like that.
So just to add to this, we use the cameras for a totally different purpose. These guys, they use it to keep an eye on the event. We use these to make sure that we understand the result of certain things that we did. For example, if you've applied brine on a particular road, how well did the brine work? How well did the live edge plow work? How much time did it buy you? So it's a different tool for us and it's a different tool for these guys, but at the end of the day, we're truly benefiting from this. Oh,
AVLs. AVLs we put in last year, it was the first year. We thought we'd get a little pushback from some of the operators, and it was actually the opposite. They liked the added bit of security and be able, if they came across something that they felt they needed to record, they pushed the button, recorded the situation. As a record point, we liked that because, or I liked it because basically I had driver inputs. I knew when it was freezing rain, I knew when it was snowing by what the driver was putting in.
So just to give you a little bit of perspective, this is something fairly cutting edge. We did not introduce this into the mix mainly because I thought there's going to be pushback. And then one day, Rob, he said, I want to try one of those. So this is basically a smartphone-like system. You just mount it onto your windshield, and it lets you do your road conditions, all your paperwork, all your record keeping. It lets you do all of that. And then he tried one for a week, and then he wanted 4 more. And then some of these guys who are actually using these have flip phones. So we weren't really confident about how successful this is going to be. But this has truly been, it's very pleasant to actually see how they've embraced this, because the guys see that there is value in doing this record keeping this way. What I'd like to show you at this point is a very powerful graphic. So there is a video that we're going to play just now on this screen. What you're seeing here is basically a route that Rob traversed. The red lines actually show where salt was applied, and the gray lines show where he actually turned the spreader off. If I click on any of these icons, I can see that he only applied salt where it was needed and not everywhere else. This is almost a paradigm shift compared to how things have been done in the past. And I often tell these guys that the day I can get everybody to do this, my work here is done. So, go ahead.
So, again, right place, right application rate, at the right time. That's what we're trying to reach now. We have calibration down. We feel that we have the equipment to progress into performing this. And we're still maintaining a very high level of service. And that's about.
So, tell us a little bit about salt savings.
Salt savings, we've reduced, every time we can not go on another round, we're saving about $560 per truck, which is huge. With our 3 main routes, that could be over $1,700. Just in January and February again, we were able to cut about 109 ton of material out, and that's just 2 months. That's compared to the year before, that's actually 2 more storms, and with similar conditions. So that was just 2 months, not the entire winter. So this has been huge for us. It's saved in overtime, saved in salt reductions, still maintaining a very high level of service. And
So do you think that 30% is a realistic, is that a realistic reduction that you already see that you achieved?
no, we're actually about 50% right now.
I wanted to put 30 in, but they're very confident.
So I think one other question related to that, Rob, is so how has this training and how has the data helped you to assess that, helped to verify that that's the 50%? So would you have known that, sort of a trick question, but would you have known that prior to this initiative?
No.
Okay. So where does this go next for you, do you think? And I want to stress one thing on where it goes next is Rob not only has, and the whole team there has embraced the training, the data, the assessment, but now that team has helped to then carry this forward. So they're now working collaboratively with some of the other municipalities in the basin. And so anytime there's a phone call that says, Rob, do you want to come up and help us calibrate? And so that's where this thing really picks up steam. So that's the culture change. So where do you think it's going to go next for you?
For me, continuing to help other people enter into sustainability. We at Lake George, we're going to continue to work for more savings to try to beat that 50% and all around save money, become good environmental stewards, as well as still maintain that very high level of service.
With all this, has the level of service changed? And if so, how?
Yes, we're actually, instead of being just reactive, where before it snowed, we went out and plowed. When it was over, we went home. Now we're being proactive. We're doing things ahead of the storm to try to lower application rates to provide a better service, help the environment, as well as save money.
Excellent.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tim and Matt, Town of Hague.
This is going to be fun, right?
So we pretty much followed what Lake George was doing. They were the ones that led forward, and we asked Rob lots of questions, and the fund for Lake George provided us with the equipment that we needed. And so once that was established and we had the tools to work with, we take care of 110 lane miles in Hague. 50 of them are from the state, on state roads. So we got another 60 or so county and town roads. So in in 2017, we were at total salt usage of 2,200 tons. And then in 2018, when we started implementing the live edge and starting the brine practice, we dropped it to 2,000 tons for the year. And then we turned around and we decided our salt was basically used on state roads, and we were using a sand salt mix on our town and county roads. Well, in last year, we decided we went to all salt and used the practices. They didn't tell us how to do it and what to do. Rakib and Rob, they tried to make us figure out what to do and when and how from our data and what our past practices were. So last year, we were able to not only double our mileage, but we also dropped it down to 1,700 tons, which is a 500-ton saving, but we really doubled our mileage. And a 500 ton at $72 a ton is about $35,000 in savings just from previous years. So it does fund itself. Once you get going and you get to learn the right practices and everything, and it works. We old school drivers, we would have never thought you take the sand out of it and blah, blah, blah. They won't be able to get up the hills, and we're better performing. When the plow truck goes by, they're scraping right black and cars are following us.
We eliminated sand totally. The only time we use sand, which is a very important factor for the Lake George Basin, by eliminating that sand, we're no longer having ice pack. We're no longer allowing the salt to create the bond by pre-treating the roads with the liquid. The pictures that you'll see here are going to speak for themselves, and just Matt's summary on the numbers that we crunched. It's so cost effective and it's so beneficial for the environment, road safety, the drivers, you guys know it. We're fortunate enough to be 5 guys, but we work together. We turned it into a game. Who can use the least amount of salt during a storm? And
Yeah.
the results are magnificent. It's just, you got to start with that live edge and then test and work with the liquid applications. Once you learn them liquid applications, it becomes easier. Temperature gauges help for higher elevations. We heard the mayor talk about from Lake Placid here. You're in a higher elevation. Once you start learning that science and you apply that road temperature versus air temperature, you know how much more you can increase your salt or your liquid with a pre-wet system and then drop it back down when you come down out of those elevations. It all adds up. You just have to really learn it and get involved and try to play with it.
Can you guys just for a minute tell the story? Let's go back to the tanks for a minute. Can you tell the story of what's going on with these tanks? Because this was real fun for me when I visited them and learned what they actually did here.
We found that when our brining system, we had them on the ground and we were trying to pump in, and once we ran our tanks down and them tanks got lower, we'd have a hard time picking up prime again. So by doing that, if power went out, we could still gravity feed to our trucks or our brine applicators. And not only does the salt brine use for the pre-wet, but we're also introducing it this year for brining. We're also introducing it as pre-wet as salt as we're putting it down. And then the live edge, we like them.
Unbelievable.
So this was really innovative how they set this up though. So I mean, you essentially took resources that you already had.
Yes.
I learned it. So between the Mafia block and then, so just tell that a little bit there, because that's a great story. So this is really innovation. Instead of making excuses for not having everything they needed, they said, well, wait a minute, let's just band together and figure out how we can make this work with what we have.
Yeah, not only that, but I mean, the towns around us, we're all trying to work together, and when we trying to get used to brining, trying to figure out how to set up your truck to get your 35 to 42 gallons per minute and blah, blah, blah. We'd have to figure in with Rob, and Rob would come together, and we'd get together with Dresden and Ticonderoga and a bunch of other towns. So we're all trying to learn it together, so we're passing that information forward as we go.
So we heard the results. Where do you think the change, what was the change between no brine and brine?
All fantastic. On ice storms, you still build ice on top of the brine, but when you go to plow it, it'll scrape right off.
Yeah.
You know, you prevent that bond from happening, and all of a sudden, we plow drivers know, all of a sudden when it gets quiet, you know, you could be in trouble. So we turn around and now we're scraping, ice is coming off, you know, because of the brine being put down before the ice storms. A lot of times you don't know if you're gonna get the ice or the snow. So you took a chance of putting the brine down. The cost, or, you know, I think the biggest thing that I didn't hear yet was, you know, we try to run down to 100 pounds per lane mile. Well, basically 100 pounds a lane mile is 2 5-gallon pails in a mile. That's what the 100 pounds a lane mile comes out to be. So when you can put a liquid rate down, it's still lower than the 100. So your first initial hit, you're still putting your numbers lower yet than you actually would in the past by using the brine. And then to get the results of a black road when you scrape it is, you know, and then it all adds up into savings.
Our first year, we actually used the granular because we weren't set up with the, remember when we?
Yep.
So I had these charts for Rakib. I'm like, wait till you see the numbers that we've reduced. And he goes, I don't care about that. I'm going to show you something different. And then he gave us this liquid information, and we were just pumping his brain for it. Poor Rob, thank you, Rob, for initiating the help with everything that we questioned, because Matt and I tag teamed, and when we called him up and we beat him up on doing that application rate on how you're gonna figure out how much you're gonna put down miles per gallon. But then he's like, stop, there's a website. Go mark your 5-gallon buckets with 1-gallon bucket. It makes it so much easier. It's not as complicated as you think. You know, I made a comment to Dave Wick, it was last year or the year before when I first met. I was like, could you put it in layman terms a little bit better than that? Because I'm, again, old school drivers. I'm a new driver. I'm coming in on my 4th year full time, but I was a part-time driver. So I was listening to them and listening to the new technologies coming in. And the numbers, like we said, they provide for themselves. Don't keep a closed mind, keep an open mind. Because it'll enable you to have more initiative to become involved in it. And once you start seeing the numbers, I mean, I've slid down mountains sideways. I understand, I get it, I know how scared it makes you. This will prevent that. So, it's a no-brainer.
That's awesome, thank you guys.
Just FYI, I mean, you guys can become consultants tomorrow and start doing this. Just letting you know. So with these guys, I mean, what's important here is that they're a much smaller organization with fewer resources. And when we first went, like 4 years ago, they had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. Absolutely no idea. So it's very rewarding and humbling at the same time to actually see that they've now become consultants. So it's amazing what the kind of progress they've made with the resources they had. So thank you guys, and then thank you Rob again for helping these guys out. Rob's he's a hero. All right, so next we've got Steve Johnson, Warren County. With Steve, the story's a little bit different. It's only been one season that we worked together. The county, of course, is a much larger organization, a lot more formal. So it's a bigger problem, it's a different problem. The scope of the problem is very different. So now we'd like you to hear from Steve's perspective on how he thinks this might help these guys. So, Steve.
All right. Thank you. My name's Steve Johnson with Warren County DPW. I am the highway manager. I started there about 2.5 years ago, and my strength was heavy civil construction. So the snow and ice and that was kind of something I had to learn on the fly. My first experience, I went to the first SALT Summit 3 years ago, and we had these trackers in our trucks, and nobody was really bought into it. It's like, we got these things, these guys are showing up, we're putting these things on. What are they doing with our information? Oh, I don't know, they're probably, whatever. So, the next year I went back, I was looking at the numbers from Rakib, and I said, oh, hey, which trucks are we, where's our information? And basically we had no useful information that had transpired from those trackers. So the next year, I kind of hounded Rakib and I said, okay, what can we do to make this happen? I'm looking at what Lake George is doing, what Rob and the guys are doing down there, and it's like, we can do better. Some of the mentality I got from some of the guys was, the roads will take the salt that they're gonna take. Yeah, you're right, but we could maybe give them what they need to achieve our goals. So it's a little bit different perspective. I've got 44 different drivers in plow routes throughout a season. So there's all different skill levels, all different knowledge. But where we started with Rakib, just to backtrack here, let's pick three trucks with 3 routes, and we'll put cameras up on each of those routes. Perfect. The initial response I got after we started brining was, it doesn't work. Okay. Well, we're going to keep doing it because the science says that it does work, so let's just do it and we'll see what happens. The same guy who said this doesn't work after the first time, 3/4 of the way through the season said, boy, that stuff works good. I said, yeah, so how can we get better at it? How can we reduce the salt? How can we, be fiscally responsible as well as environmentally responsible? Our savings, we're not really seeing yet. We're still figuring out where are we going? When I first got there, it was, hey, we ordered this amount a year, we use X amount a year, and yeah, it is what it is. Order that much next year. This was kind of a challenge because it's like, okay, these guys are reducing what they're using, they're being more environmentally responsible and fiscally responsible. Let's jump on board. How can we get involved? So with our cameras on, these are 2 different beats that we have, and these are the application rates that we saw this past winter. One road was brined, one road was not brined. Okay, you can see here this top one, they are kind of doing what Lake George is doing. This was without any training. These were guys who have been doing it a long time. They know what they're doing. 200 pounds per lane mile, and then as the storm progresses, they're going a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. Okay, well, why? Well, because we keep doing the rounds and we keep plowing off the more stuff we put on, we're just plowing it off before it has a chance to act. This is the set it and forget it. Hey, we're going 200 the whole storm, we're gonna blast it, we're gonna plow it off, we're gonna go and we're gonna do it again. Okay. Why are we gonna do that? That doesn't make a lot of sense. If we can use less salt, have the same level of service, let's do that. The way we can do that is through training. There's nothing, these guys here, there's nothing wrong with this. This is the way we've always done it. Okay, I'm not going to come in here and say, you know what, I've never sat in a tandem plowing snow. I'm going to tell you how to do it. That would work not very well. Okay, so, okay, let's see where we're at. Here's where we're at. So I've got some guys that are doing it, some guys that are not. All right, does the brine work? Nope, doesn't work at all. Okay, let's look at the data. All right, a road that we brined, pre-treated, same time as the one we didn't. What happened? We've got more time to respond. As you guys were saying, that ice and snow doesn't have a chance to bond to the road. So when we go through, it comes right out. The cost of the brine is minimal. It's crazy cheap, 20 cents a gallon. So to do this, and with the salt you end up saving, it like you said, it pays for itself. Let's see, live edge plows. We just got our first live edge plow last year, towards the end of the season, so we didn't get much experience using it. We have another one coming this year, but the science is there. Looking at what Lake George is doing, it's going to work. It's going to be great. One other thing we did as well is I had all of my foremen make a list. Where are the bad spots where we're having to blast the extra salt and why? Well, there's runoff coming off of these driveways. This ditch line's not cleared. These trees are over here. Okay, how many on this road? A whole bunch. No, how many? Are there 10? Are there 15? Are there 20? We can't possibly fix them all in one season, but we can fix some, and we can reduce the amount that we're having to blast. So why not try to try to do better? Let's see here. Treated salt. My experience with the regular salt that I ran into, my foreman calls me up and says, hey, we've got glaciers here. Well, what do you mean? We just got a fresh delivery. And they show me a picture and there's chunks like this. Well, just break them up. We tried to, but they're actually ice. Oh, okay. I look at the size of the treated salt, it's all the same size. Those chunks of ice, those chunks of salt, one of our big areas where we were losing a lot of salt is, okay, the gate's plugged up with a chunk of salt. They've got to lift the gate up, get it out, and then sometimes the gate doesn't go right back to where it was calibrated. So now we're thinking we're putting 200 pounds per lane mile, when in fact we're putting 600 or 700 pounds per lane mile. Okay, how do we fix that? We're going to all treated salt this year because it's all going to be one size. It shouldn't clump up as much. We'll see how it goes. But that's part of this, the initiative is let's always look for a better way to do things. We're going to run into problems, but let's find solutions. Let's, try to do better. Let's learn from Lake George. Let's learn from Hague. Let's work together. It's not, it's funny. I had a degree in teaching, and it was like, if you're taking somebody else's information when you're in school, that's cheating. In teaching, it's called sharing and collaboration. So there's no reason why, I can't look at them and say, hey, these guys are doing this, let's do this, but let's also try this, and let's also try this. The biggest thing is getting people to be invested in it, because the same person that says, no, it doesn't work, well, let's get the data and prove that it works, get people on board, get a core group of people that want to see this succeed. Kevin Hajos, my boss, when we first started, he said, are you going to get that brine truck going this year or what? And I'm worried about everything else I've got. We're finishing paving, we're finishing the bridge crew, we're doing all, yes, Kevin, I'll bring it out. And the mentality is, okay, I'm going to do it to appease Kevin. Well, after a few times, it's like, oh, we got to expand this. We should be doing this on all of our roads. This is, it's the way of the future. So the live edge plows, we're going to be adding one, and we'll see how that works this year. I have a good feeling about it. We're going to do some additional training with our guys. Calibration, we're going to do more frequently. In the past, it's been kind of the set it and forget it of we're going to calibrate at the beginning of the year. We're going to go through and then see what happens. Well, this year we're going to be more proactive. And we're gonna keep trying to get better. Application rates, best practices, they're guidelines. We want to look and attack the storms, see what the storm's going to do over the course of that storm, and have a game plan so we can attack that storm using the least amount of material, safely keeping the same level of service. So
Awesome, man.
That's what I've got.
So,
Yeah.
Chris, would you mind bringing up those? These are pretty hefty plaques here. So with that, one thing that I just want to help stress here is I think with a lot of these types of initiatives, particularly here, you always sort of start with the end in mind, which is it must be something to do with the rate. And I think what's really happened here, what's evolved here is, I think you're starting to learn that the application rate has a little something to do with it, but a lot of this is really related to culture change. And in each one of these organizations, it's been a different story actually. So it's not necessarily a cookie cutter solution. It's really measuring what you want to improve first, and then using that data to then build confidence to say, oh, wait a minute, this other way, this better way potentially of doing things works.
Right.
But it's taken us a number of years actually to sort of prove that to ourselves. And I just want to stress, because there's a lot of other drivers here. These folks are tasked with an enormous responsibility for public safety, for a level of service. Saving money, yet also, driving meeting an expectation that just continues to rise. So that's from all of us in this room. We all have sort of become this entitled society, if you will, where we have the God-given right to get up every morning and get to work at the same time every day and not slow down and do other things. We have the God-given right to have Amazon deliver a package to our door the next day. These are the things that drive that, right? So they're trying to meet that level of service expectation while reducing. And so really what they've managed to actually do here is implement a constant improvement cycle. Here's your heroes.